Hey everyone, welcome to episode 157 of the Conscious Resistance Live. My name is Derrick Broze, and tonight we're going to be talking about Iran, of course, and the bombings taking place, whether or not what Trump is doing is constitutional or not, whether or not this ceasefire is really going to last, and also whether we should be worried about Iranian sleeper cells. We're also going to talk about some reports of a pedophile ring in Israel. We're going to look at a few other important stories from the past few weeks that I've been stacking up, including one about Detachment 201, which is this merger of big tech and the U.S. military. And there's so much to cover into tonight. So thanks again, everybody who's tuned in. Let's get to it. This is Derrick Broze. This is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance. I'm here in Standing Rock.
That man is wanted in 5 different countries: Chile, Argentina, Brazil.
We've been fighting a long time. We've all lost so very much. So many loved ones gone.
Don't you fucking tease that horse!
We're not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the planet. We are at the brink. Above all, stay alive. You have no idea how important you are. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Again, my name is Derrick Broze. You're watching the Conscious Resistance Live. We've got quite a few stories to cover tonight, so let's just go ahead and jump into it. I want to start by always reminding everybody to check out my website, theconsciousresistance.com. This is where I've been producing all of my content for more than a decade now, and you can find documentaries, podcasts, books, interviews, articles. I'm writing my own articles at theconsciousresistance.com now. I'm not currently contributing to The Last American Vagabond. I may be again soon, but right now I'm writing my own articles on my own website. You can find past documentaries, as I mentioned, and all of my presentations, including I will be releasing 2 new talks from recent weeks. I was on the road. I gave a presentation at the Rise and Vibes Music Festival in New Mexico a couple weeks back. And then I also went to Portland about a week ago, where I performed music in Portland and Seattle, but I also gave a presentation called Why We Must Exit and Build as Digital Surveillance Rises. So I'll be posting both of those soon. And I just want to say on that, I tend to think that my presentations are some of my more important work. I know most of you follow me specifically just for the journalism or for the news, but for those of you who really get the bigger, broader message of the conscious resistance, I want to invite you to actually check out my presentations, because I think that's where the key solutions that I share are found. It's not necessarily in the weekly news reports like this, although it seeps in either way. But in reality, I save my more philosophical, spiritual, solutions-focused content for the presentations and for my books. The purpose of this show is to bring you news that you're not going to find elsewhere, and of course, to do it from a perspective that actually sticks to the truth and doesn't, fill you with a lot of fear porn. There's a lot of fear porn going around right now, guys. I don't know if you've seen Civil War, Red Alert. That was a couple of weeks ago when the No Kings protests were coming up. So many people said that the country was going to be on fire. And then other people were telling you that it was about to be World War III. And I think we're definitely closer than we ever have been. But the point is that, there's a lot of people out there trying to fill your head with fear, not just corporate media, mainstream media, a lot of so-called independent media, what we have come to call the mainstream alternative media. They are also a big part of the problem. And I've named names. If you follow me on social media, you know that I've named names. I would say people like InfoWars, Luke Rudkowski, and even some shows I've been on, unfortunately, are bad with the fear porn. But that's not what we do here. So I want to invite you to support us. Go to theconsciousresistance.com, sign up for our weekly newsletter where I send out updates whenever I'm going to be doing talks, whenever I am putting out new videos, things of that sort. It's a great place to just stay plugged in. And along with that, I want to remind you guys as well, just last week, the first issue of the Agorist Cipher, which is a new newsletter online zine at agoristcipher.com. That's AGORIST, Agorist. And Cipher, CIPHER, agoristcipher.com. And if you go there, you can pick up the newsletter. From what I can tell and what I've understood is that the newsletter actually does have a free version, but there's, of course, a paid version if you want to support the different writers who are participating in this, including myself and several other agorists who are really the kind of people who are on the cutting edge of trying to provide solutions and focused on building parallel systems and alternative networks. So if you want to support that, you can go to agoristcipher.com. You can use my code Derrick5 and you get a 5% discount, I believe it is. That would make sense. And when you check out, you can get that. So look at that. I encourage you to, because I'll show you right here for those watching the screen. There are the first week's issue included field reports from the front lines of the war on crypto from Sal Mayweather, Decentralized Passive Income, Every Little Bit Adds Up by Brandon Aragon, Living Free Without Losing It All from John Bush about the inside-outside strategy, Fasting for Freedom from Aaron Day about Roger Ver, and then I put an article, an essay together about agorism from counter economics to exit and build, and really going and more in depth into the exit and build idea that you hear me talk about here, and some others there. So this is going to be a regular monthly newsletter that is going to be coming out. It came out this time in June. We're planning now already for July. I just wrote a new essay that's coming out in July. It's called Temporary Autonomous Agoras. And the whole idea behind this is, how do we create spaces and systems where we can come together and propagate the message of liberty and the message of freedom? And specifically, if you're an agorist, which we believe in building counter economies, underground economies, parallel systems, then I think there are some specific steps we can do to try to advocate and get these ideas out there. And that's what I call a temporary autonomous agora. So you'll learn more about that in this upcoming essay. And I encourage you guys to check that out, because there's going to be some cool writing. And that's pretty much going to be the only place where you can find me currently writing about agorism besides theconsciousresistance.com. And I'm probably in the coming weeks going to actually update some old videos I've done from like 10 or more years ago that obviously most of you out there haven't seen and never watched, that I think are still good videos. They might need better audio, and maybe animate them and bring back that stuff, because I recognize that a lot of my audience isn't really familiar with agorism, isn't really voluntarist or anarchist, and that's fine. I never expected everybody who follows my journalism to be also anarchist or voluntarist, but I do think those of you who explore these ideas will see why they're valuable, and will come to realize that government is immoral, and that people can we can better organize ourselves without the need for government. Doesn't mean there would be no rules, no organization, no laws or anything like that. It just means you find a way to do it without this central authority, without this imposed, immoral, violent authority that is funded through involuntary taxation, aka extortion. So that's a story for another day, but I do think I'm going to start putting some of that content back out, because I think I need to catch you guys up and maybe give it one more shot at trying to spread the good old word about human liberation in the form of individual liberty and voluntarism. So let's go ahead, though, and start tonight's show. First story of the night, we're going to talk about the Bilderberg Group. The Bilderberg Group has been, happening every year since 1954, starting at the Bilderberg Hotel, and that's where it gets the name. Officially, this group doesn't have a name, or we don't know it. It's never been put to the public, leaked, communicated, anything like that. So we truly don't know what they call themselves, if they even have themselves, because maybe there's no need for a name, actually. Either way, whether they have a name or not, they are clearly an important, powerful group. And thankfully, people like Jim Tucker, who's now deceased, have been reporting on them since, I believe, the 90s, maybe even earlier. And there were some reports on them I found in the course of my research for the Pyramid of Power final episode, which is coming out in just the next couple of weeks, and does include a significant section on the Bilderberg Group, including new information which I have not seen reported elsewhere. In the course of my research, I was able to find articles from the 60s, maybe even a little earlier, on the Bilderberg Group in European media. The American media, I think the first time it gets mentioned is like the 70s. But of course, these were very sparing and in passing. If you were to do research and find all of the newspaper reporting on the Bilderberg Group prior to, say, the 2000s or mid-2000s, you would only find, I would say, 10 or less articles, if that. That might be asking too much from the American media. And that was because, though the group is more well-known now in 2005, and they even have a website, for the most of their history, they have been truly a very secretive group. People would only every now and then kind of figure out which hotels they were going to be meeting up in. And then those who did get that inside information would try to show up and ask questions of the attendees, typically with very little success. And then, of course, in the YouTube era, in the post 9/11 era, the internet era, people have gotten more information and started to actually show up. There have been protests organized outside of Bilderberg Group meetings, including by Alex Jones back in the 2010s and mid 2000s. And sometimes there was hundreds of people that would show up to this. Now, these days, there's not too many people going. Dan Dix of Press for Truth in Canada did go this year. We're going to show one of his videos in just a moment. But my point is that the Bilderberg Group is not necessarily new, but the even slight coverage of them is relatively new. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happened in the 2025 meeting, because I tweeted this last week, and I even think I talked about this on the previous show, that as the secretive Bilderberg Group prepares to meet this coming week, it's important to remember that Alex Karp and Peter Thiel, founders of Palantir, are both steering committee members of the group. Of course, Alex Karp, Peter Thiel, Palantir becoming more and more household names as people recognize that this is part of the technocracy. And as I've been reporting since prior to the election, there was a very heavy Peter Thiel influence in the Trump's first administration and the second one, and that there's at least 15, maybe 20 people who are former employees of Peter Thiel or worked for Palantir, connected to that Thielverse, as they say, in one way or another. And that is not something you really hearing people discuss in the context of the Bilderberg Group, which is why, let me just go ahead and jump ahead of myself for a moment, why the fact that Dan Dix actually did confront Peter Thiel about Palantir, Jeffrey Epstein, and Big Brother surveillance system. This is his video. I'm just going to play the clip. You won't hear the audio, but I will include this in the show notes. You can find it over at pressfortruth.ca and just search Peter Thiel. And Dan just straight up follows him through the streets of, where were they? I think they were in Stockholm this year. And just, pegging him with questions about Palantir, his connection to Jeffrey Epstein, all kinds of different things like that, it's a beautiful thing to see. We need more of these types of conversations. I've written articles about this and the importance of confronting powerful officials and how the impact that has and why that's a moral win, even if you don't really get an answer. So nevertheless, that's what I think is one of the big pieces of the puzzle here, is the fact that the Bilderberg Group is, I think, more entrenched in the U.S. White House than they probably have ever been. Not to say they've never been, of course. We know that the Bilderberg Group has been an influential organization, institution, but I think the level at which they have penetrated the White House, as the World Economic Forum says they do about the cabinets, is unprecedented, I think, here. And there, as I say here in this tweet, there's not one single person in the mainstream media or the podcasting space who has spoken with Alex Karp, Peter Thiel, that even brings up the Bilderberg Group. I also pointed out that Michael Kratsios, who's Trump's office of the White House, director of the White House of Office of Science and Technology, that he was attending Bilderberg. You can see his name here listed, USA, Director, White House Office, Science and Technology Policy, and you can even see Alex Karp's name up there too, CEO of Palantir Technology. And this is the same guy that I reported in my articles, as well as in my mini documentary on Donald Trump, Peter Thiel, and the technocracy, that Michael Kratsios, prior to being at the White House's Office of Science and Technology, has worked for two of Peter Thiel's funds, Thiel Capital and Clarium. So again, a Peter Thiel connected person put into the position of the White House, now attending the Bilderberg Group. Why is there not more discussion of this? Let's get back to that question in just a moment, but let's look at the mainstream. If I search Bilderberg Sweden, the only thing that pops up, okay, I got a Reuters article, 6 paragraphs, and this one is, I think, interesting. We'll pull this one up. The Guardian, which is Charlie Skelton. You can always count on Charlie Skelton, which The Guardian, I think, is somewhat mainstream. They're kind of on that edge. I guess you could call them mainstream. But Charlie Skelton has worked there for years, and he always writes about the Bilderberg Group. Okay, and then you got the Daily Mail, which sometimes does report important news, but most people look at it as kind of like tabloid. World's most secret society meets in Sweden as tensions between Europe and Trump reach boiling point. RBC Ukraine, secret meeting to be held in Sweden to discuss future of Ukraine. A few articles from small outlets, not, this isn't the New York Times. This isn't, there's Rebel News, so there's some independent media, but really there's no coverage of this. This is what we call a blackout here. So check out this Reuters article, though. At the end, it says this: how much impact groups like Bilderberg actually have is hard to judge, according to Christina Garsten, professor at the Swedish Collegium for Advanced Studies, who studies transnational think tanks. They aim to shape broad political and corporate agendas, but if they are seen as having too much influence, they can be accused of being anti-democratic. She says, quote, it's there that conspiracies can flower in that space of secrecy. She dismissed the belief held by some groups that the Bilderberg Group made up a shadowy world government. I think it's very much exaggerated. It's just funny that they have to, even in this like 6-paragraph thing here, 7, 8 lines, not very long at all, they feel the need to make sure to bring in an expert who says those claims of it being a shadowy conspiracy are not true. Don't worry about that. There's nothing to see here. It's a little bit exaggerated. Nevertheless, like I said, Michael Kratsios, Peter Thiel acolyte, White House Office of Director of Office of Science and Technology Policy, attending the Bilderberg Group, and not a mention from independent media for the most part, and definitely not a mention from the Trump world and from MAGA world over on Rumble that's also funded by Peter Thiel. And this reminds me of a video I did a few years back. This is called "The Silence from InfoWars is Deafening" from 2016. It's an article, a video I did going through and showing in Trump's first year in office how he had all these connections. Like, for example, former governor of Texas, Rick Perry, who was also a Bilderberg attendee, he named him as the Department of Energy director. And I was showing here how at one point InfoWars, I pulled up this article here titled "Bilderberg approved Perry to become presidential frontrunner" from like 2012 or something. At that point, they were calling out Rick Perry for being associated with the Bilderberg Group. And then once he gets named to head of Department of Energy, and InfoWars even reported on it, Trump names Rick Perry to head Department of Energy. There's no mention in there at all of his connection to the Bilderberg Group. And the same thing, Trump to name Exxon CEO Rex Tillerson. Rex Tillerson's also got some shady things going on. And Jones mentioned nothing about it. So the point was to show how InfoWars, along with other independent media, have gone silent. And so I just wanted to do sort of a part 2 of this article before we wrap up this segment to show how some people really have turned, like they've just changed. Where Alex Jones used to teach people about the left-right paradigm and used to go to the Bilderberg Group and used to call it out. And I know he's talked about it this year. All his fans are telling me, Derrick, he did talk about it. He even mentioned Peter Thiel, but he doesn't get into any of the details. He doesn't mention what I just mentioned, that there is literally somebody in Trump's White House who is attending the Bilderberg Group, and that the man who has partnered with the Trump administration in numerous ways, Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, who founded Palantir, which Jones has tried to downplay it, as I'll show you in just a moment. He doesn't mention any of that stuff. He just says, okay, well, yeah, Bilderberg Group's happening. And I'll show you. In fact, I think they have some fake news and sort of a misdirect, just some exclusive story from I don't know. We'll get into that in just a moment. But so that's what I showed back in 2016. Now let's go to Infowars.com right now. I searched Bilderberg Group right here. You can see Bilderberg search results. And what did they have 9 days ago? Guardian. This is talking about Charlie Skelton's article that we just went over. They did mention that depopulation was on the Bilderberg 2025 agenda, which was very odd, depopulation and migration. And then they even did a little article about Dan Dix confronting Peter Thiel. Right here, you're setting up a Big Brother surveillance system. Journalist confronts Peter Thiel. I'll show you that in just a moment. They did 71st Bilderberg meeting, attendees revealed. Okay, and then 5 months ago, 10 months ago, gets older, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces on there, and two of them are just basic information about the attendees and the topics, which is public knowledge, and one of them is just a reprinting of the Guardian. So the only ones that are different is Dan Dix's confrontation of Peter Thiel, which is basically a copy and aggregate from his website, and then this so-called exclusive story. And this is the one I want to look at here. This exclusive. Why won't you open up for me? Let me see if I can get that to open up in just a moment. But it's titled "Exclusive Leak from Bilderberg. Globalists see Trump as their number one enemy." Let me see if I got this one pulled up. Exclusive. So you see here, InfoWars has this claimed exclusive. And this is kind of sad for me. I'll get into this. Bilderberg. Globalists see Trump as their number one enemy and carrying out their transhumanist one world government agenda. Bilderberg leak. Bilderberg Group expert Daniel Echelon, who I have actually reached out to and I did interview for the Pyramid of Power, but he didn't make the final cut, namely because, he just didn't really give any answer that I thought was going to be valuable for what we're doing. And that does include that I think Daniel has, unfortunately, although he was one of the first whistleblowers and experts on the Bilderberg Group, seems to kind of have it in his head that Trump is a good guy. And that's basically what he's telling Alex Jones here. And Alex Jones is reporting that as an exclusive leak from Bilderberg. There's no leak here. I mean, Daniel may have claimed he had something. And, if he's claiming he's got, sources within Bilderberg, you can decide if you want to believe him. But to me, it's just interesting that this just shows that the only really kind of discussion of Bilderberg that Jones will do is an exclusive leak, making it like the Bilderberg is marked President Trump for destruction, designating him the number one threat to the New World Order scheme. And it's this interview with Daniel. That's Daniel Echelon right there on the screen. Check out further analysis on this during Echelon's recent interview on the Alex Jones Show. Exclusive prediction. If he doesn't destroy the NW first, the globalists will kill President Trump to demonstrate what happens when you stand up to their system, warns top political researcher. That's Daniel Echelon, right? So that's pretty much the reporting that InfoWars did on that. Now let's go here to the one on Peter Thiel. Again, this is Dan Dix confronting Peter Thiel, and it's just kind of a summary of what happened. Now, check this out, though. This is interesting because at the bottom it says update. They felt the need to add this little addendum here, which I think is kind of funny. Update. Alex Jones has filed numerous reports on how the AI surveillance control grid feared to be coming is already here and in place, and how Palantir hysteria is mainly being raised by the legacy media and corporate leftists like Google, who are upset they won't be the AI company chosen for government contracts or to control the data infrastructure. So he tries to paint opposition to Palantir as hysteria and that it's only coming from the legacy media. So this is because one of the big articles that made waves a couple weeks ago was from the New York Times. But people like myself and others in the independent media have been talking about Palantir for quite some time. And I'm sure, again, if we search Palantir on InfoWars, we'll probably find articles from years ago when they were talking about it. But now it's not cool because Trump's doing it. So you got to defend him at all costs. So it's hysteria to call out Palantir. And this is mainly by legacy media and corporate leftists who are just mad that they're not going to get AI contracts. And I just think that's funny that they put that in as an update. It's like they felt the need to sort of preempt any criticism from people like myself, because it's like, okay, they want to report on Bilderberg, but they also recognize that there's enough controversy out there where people are calling out Alex Jones for just losing his way. So I still do think Bilderberg is important. I think I probably did a video years ago called Does Bilderberg Even Matter? Actually, let's just check that. Let's do it live. And the point of that video, which I will include in the show notes, was not to say that Bilderberg has no place for discussion. I haven't listened to the video in years, but I do remember my general sentiment. And that was that we shouldn't get obsessed with them, right? Like, I do think it's important to talk about them. I do think that they are playing a role in the bigger picture of things. And this is why they are going, there's a section in them on the Pyramid of Power about the Bilderberg Group. But yeah, this is so May 2019. I did at Bilderberg that year, so 6 years ago. Does Bilderberg still matter? Breaking down the latest 2019 conference and asking, does it still matter? And I do think it does. I do think it does matter, even if the point is we shouldn't allow obsession with the so-called elite and these people to make it where we don't actually take concrete steps in our lives to empower ourselves. That's the point. As a journalist, I do think it matters, and that I want to contribute to talking about them when the corporate media and most of the independent media have kind of lost their way or sold out, or just don't even bother talking about it. Well, then we're going to be the ones to talk about it. So I still do think it does matter, and I will continue to talk about this as long as I can. And I hope in the coming years to make it to one of the Bilderberg meetings, because, man, Dan Dix, you did a great job. I wish I was the one that was there to question Peter Thiel right there with you. And I'm thankful to everybody who's out there doing that work. It's important. It takes time. It takes money. It takes energy. But somebody has to shine a light on what's going on with the Bilderberg Group. And I do think they're not going away necessarily. And I also want to say this, and you'll find out more in the final episodes of the Pyramid of Power. I don't think the Bilderberg Group is the top of the pyramid per se. I think they're the representatives, one of the final roundtable groups representing the true ruling class. And I'll talk about who that is in the final episodes of the Pyramid of Power. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Are you using your phone, or is it using you? Rise above mass surveillance and discover a phone that protects your privacy and communications.
Above Phone does everything your old phone does, without tracking you, while giving you complete control over your phone and apps. We are better than big tech. It works with any cell service. No forced logins. No advertising or tracking. Download apps privately. Control your phone and its apps with secure hardware. Introducing Above Suite. Protects your internet traffic. Private email on any device. Video call with friends privately. Encrypted chat, calls, and internet phone. Protect your searches and get results. Don't worry if you're new. Every phone includes a free 45-minute live call. You also get free email and chat support, free guides and video courses. We can take back our technology. We're here to help with tools and education. You have the power.
Rise above with Above Phone.
AbovePhone.com.
Okay, so our next story relates to Detachment 201. Have you guys heard of this? Detachment 201. I wrote an article about it. It's at theconsciousresistance.com. You're going to find it in the show notes. Here is a picture of Detachment 201, which is actually kind of interesting. This is 4 big tech CEOs being sworn in as U.S. Army Reserve Lieutenant Colonels. And this is part of this new initiative, which is, as I said, is called Detachment 201, and which itself is part of a broader Army initiative aimed at making the Army more efficient using the latest technologies. But officially what's taking place is this is a first of its kind partnership with executives from big tech firms like Palantir, Meta, and OpenAI. This happened literally the day before Trump's military parade. So just the last couple of weeks have been really interesting. It's like you have Trump's military parade and the anniversary of the Army, and then Israel starts bombing Iran, as we're going to talk about in a little bit. You had the Bilderberg Group happening right then. And that was one of the other points I wanted to make before, is that we don't even know if the Bilderberg Group, maybe at the Bilderberg Group, the decision to go after Iran was made, because oftentimes those sorts of decisions are made. The point is, there's been a lot of interesting things happening. And while all that's swirling about, this new Army program gets started, Detachment 201, the Army's Executive Innovation Corps. That's what they call it. The Army said that the program is designed to fuse cutting-edge tech expertise with military innovation. And the new lieutenant colonels are Shyam Sankar, who's the Chief Technology Officer for Palantir, Andrew Bosworth, often known as the Boz, Chief Technology Officer for Meta, Kevin Weil, Chief Product Officer for OpenAI, and Bob McGrew, advisor at Thinking Machines Lab and former Chief Research Officer for OpenAI. So 4 gentlemen from these tech firms, this is showing them in the picture being sworn in on Friday, the 15th, I believe it was. And so they're not really going to be necessarily treated as true lieutenant colonels, at least as far as we can tell here, because typically that's for an officer who has been in their second decade of military service, and they will typically lead several hundred soldiers. But I don't think these guys, hopefully these guys are not going to be given some soldiers to order around and dictate what they do. But it's overall part of, as I said, something called Army Transformation Initiative, which is about helping the Army Reserve officers use targeted projects to, quote, guide rapid and scalable tech solutions to complex problems to make the Army, quote, leaner, smarter, and more lethal. So I thought that was interesting. And the whole 201 thing, Andrew Bosworth, who's one of these 4 men, says that it's a reference to an HTTP coding command that indicates the creation of a new programming resource. But the name, I think, is eerily reminiscent for many of us to Event 201, which was the October 2019 exercise that was simulated how the world would respond to a coronavirus pandemic sweeping the planet before we ever heard the words COVID-19. This simulation was organized, of course, by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, and the good old World Economic Forum. So I'm not saying they're related in some way. I'm just saying it's just weird. 201. Maybe because that's not a good thing, and it's, just giving me the bad vibes. But as I wrote here, the announcement of Detachment 201 and the swearing of the 4 executives came during the Bilderberg meeting. So our last story, we're talking about the Bilderberg meeting, and this is what I was saying, is like there's all this stuff swirling about. They're swearing in 4 executives into the Army reserves as lieutenant colonels as part of Detachment 201. The Bilderberg wannabe elite are meeting in Stockholm, Sweden, and then Trump's having his army parade the same weekend, and then shortly after that, Israel starts bombing Iran, and yeah, it's getting wild out there. And as I pointed out in the previous story, and again here in this article, Peter Thiel and Alex Karp of Palantir, which is one of these guys, works for Palantir, are steering committee members of the Bilderberg Group. So it's just a lot of weird things happening. And of course, Michael Kratzios, good old Michael Kratzios, director of White House Office Science and Technology Policy, and acolyte of Peter Thiel, he was in attendance at the Bilderberg Group, as well as Satya Nadella, who's a CEO of Microsoft, and then Mustafa Suleyman, who's a CEO of Microsoft AI. So there's just big tech all up in there at the Bilderberg Group. You've got other members of Anduril Industries, which is another Peter Thiel funded project that were there. There's just a lot taking place here. And for me, this all represents one more step in the direction of big tech in the military. You know, this sort of moving closer and closer to the technocracy, my friends. Like, it's the merger of not just government with the big technocracy, but this is the U.S. military merging with the big technocracy. And I don't think it's going to go in good places. Now, maybe it ends up being meaningless in the grand scheme of things because they're making so many other steps towards technocracy. This is kind of just like, you know, another trite one, but I don't know. It just something about it, especially knowing that Palantir and these companies, they are willing to build weapon systems and use their AI technology to fund weapons of war for the U.S. military, Israel, and others, right? And so bringing those relationships closer together, it doesn't make me feel all warm and fuzzy or think that the U.S. military is going to be better or anything like that. It makes me sleep less at night. I just want to warn you guys for this last story that it is a little bit graphic. We're just going to cover it briefly. It's about Israel. And mainly I'm covering this because I haven't seen anybody else cover it. It was sent to me through email, I believe. And thanks to everybody who always sends me tips and stories. I do check them out. A lot of them don't always pan out. And sometimes I think people have maybe lower standards than me in terms of what they find credible. But often I do get good tips and leads. And this is one of those stories. And if you have more information on this, please do send it to me because I'd like to do a full write-up and continue to do this investigation. I don't want it to just be a one and done. I talked about this one time and we never learned more about it. But I do want to say that it does have to do with child abuse and things of that sort. So if that's difficult for you to hear, maybe step away for 5 to 10 minutes and come back when we start talking about Iran. Let's go ahead and do this, though. Let's see what we got here. From Israel Hayam. I have no idea what this website this is the original link that was sent to me. Bottom of darkness, children raped and ritual ceremonies expose the horrors. This is from April 23rd, 2025. Multiple women recount abuse, including ritual ceremonies conducted by people that they knew, even close family members, after months of interviews with victims, their families, treatment professionals, and experts in Israel and abroad. A disturbing image emerges with difficult descriptions which are difficult to read. And yeah, I will preface that I'm not going to just read unnecessary details here. If you followed my story on my work on the Finders, the Utah ritual abuse case, obviously Jeffrey Epstein, you know that I handled these types of stories and we don't need to get into unnecessary details. I think that tells you what's going on here, what the accusations are. Of course, this hasn't been proven, but the reason I think it's interesting is because there's supposed to be more testimony coming up from these alleged victims of various ritual ceremonies taking place in Israel. And I'll just read this first paragraph. I suffered painful sodomy, truly felt like I was splitting in two. It's a terrible experience, but there's something about these things, perhaps in their strangeness, that's like maybe the hardest component is that if you tell people about these things, they'll think you're crazy. I remember many types of severe sexual abuse, but there's something about these ritualistic abuses that makes them the bottom of darkness. In direct words and with a clear voice, Amuna, a pseudonym like all the victims in this article, describes the severe abuse she allegedly experienced in her childhood. Organized sexual abuse that includes ceremonies with supposed ritual significance, horrifying ceremonies in which religious people, some from her own family, sacrificed her as an offering for spiritual transcendence or redemption. She is not alone. More than 10 women between the ages of 20 to 45 with whom we spoke describe a severe phenomenon raising serious concerns that in Israel, like in many countries worldwide, organized sexual abuse of children is occurring right under everyone's noses. And this, it goes on further. Like I said, it gets into some details about the sort of abuse. One interesting component and an important detail, it says most women we interviewed come from religious Zionist or ultra-Orthodox communities, although Shisha Bat received additional testimonies about similar cases in secular society. Therefore, it's important to emphasize that these findings don't target any specific sector, but rather direct a beam of light towards suspected crimes of the most severe kind imaginable. Crimes committed in a parallel world transparent to sight though deeply dark and sinister. Several rabbis' names appeared repeatedly in some testimony. Multiple complaints filed at different police stations around the country were all closed relatively quickly. Even when suspicions arose previously about a network harming children in Jerusalem, police investigators at best lacked sufficient tools or knowledge to properly investigate. It says, in that case, extensively exposed in 2019 on the TV program The Source, suspicions arose about a pedophile network that harmed dozens of children in the Nalahat neighborhood. Investigators tended to dismiss it as an invention, exaggeration, or panic by parents and treatment professionals, and closed the case with almost no relevant indictments. A man named Benjamin Satt was convicted and sentenced to in 2013 to imprisonment for committing indecent acts and sodomy against girls and boys aged 5 to 8. Another suspect was acquitted due to reasonable doubt. In practice, dozens of children remain traumatized and require practice of emotional therapy. So maybe it appears that this article, this website, Israel Hayom, this is where we stand. Again, I don't know anything about this article, so you can, tell me more. But if it's a trash magazine, like I said, I don't know anything about it. I'm just looking at this story. Specifically, I don't know what kind of coverage, if they're left, if they're right. They're obviously Jewish, but that's all I know. But I did find an update because this is from April. This one is coming from Haaretz, which is a known website that reports on Israel and has, I think, a certain level of credibility. I wouldn't say everything there is 100% accurate all the time, but they also reported on this. So this kind of gives a little bit more weight to this being real, I think. This was just from June 4th, 2025. I'm reporting to this on June 24th, so it's 3 weeks ago, but still it's more relevant and more recent. Survivors testify to Knesset about childhood sexual abuse network in Israel, Israeli religious ceremonies. And I think it's Knesset or Knesset is like the governing body in Israel. The women described years of abuse, including rape and torture, masked as spiritual rituals, as well as systemic silencing and neglect from authorities. As the Knesset members listened to the survivors' testimony, a number appeared visibly shaken. So this is about a special joint session on Tuesday, which would have been in the early July. Several women, mainly from ultra-Orthodox and religious Zionist communities, came forward to testify about years of childhood abuse they suffered during sadistic sexual rituals performed in religious ceremonies in Israel. Their testimonies, which also indicate repeated neglect from authorities, are part of a disturbing pattern documented by journalists, trauma experts, and NGO leaders. And they go further into this, and they talk about this. They have some quotes from different members of the Knesset and sort of describing, and they do mention that this it says the special session was a joint initiative of the Knesset Committee for the Advancement of the Status of Women and Special Committee for Youth Affairs. Chairwoman Nina Tamano, Shet of the National Unity Party, I'm sorry for the words I'm not pronouncing correctly, opened by introducing the impetus for the session. An extensive investigation published in May by Israel Hayom journalist Noam Barkan. That's the one we just read. I'm pretty sure that's who wrote this. Yep, Noam Barkan. So his investigation, which revealed harrowing allegations of organized ritual sexual abuse of children in Israel, that apparently was the spark. And that led to this testimony. And if somebody out there has access to this testimony, I will do my best to look for it. I'm assuming it's going to be mostly written in Hebrew, and maybe not in English, the actual testimony. But if somebody can find it, then I can get it translated, and I would love to learn more about this. Like I said, I don't want this to be just a one and done story where this is the one time I mention this and then I never get back to it again. But it seems very similar to some of the stories I've covered in the past. So it won't be that surprising if I do indeed find out that this has to do with networks of people within, I know some people will zero in on it saying the Zionist and ultra Orthodox, Jewish traditions, and that is an important detail, but we shouldn't act as if it's exclusively those communities. In my documentary series, and specifically the Pyramid of Power, the pedo class, which I think is chapter 15, which you can find at thepyramidofpower.net, I've covered how this is in Southern Baptists, this is in Jehovah's Witnesses, this is in Christians, this is in the Catholic Church, of course, and on and on and on. This isn't a phenomenon that is exclusive to one group of people or one religion. Unfortunately, this is, and it's not even just with religions. It's in politics. It's in celebrity culture. It's really all over the place, and it's very unfortunate. So if you've got more details on that, please do share them with me. Let me know. And we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back for our last story talking about Israel, Iran, sleeper cells, a ceasefire, what's really going on, and what should we expect next? Stay tuned, guys. So I've recently partnered with my friend Sean Hawkins of the company Cultivated Mind. He focuses on organic mushroom extracts, which are designed to help you physically, mentally, and maybe even more than that. I've just been testing them out recently. You may have seen my interview with Sean discussing this. We went over some of the specific benefits of the various types of mushrooms that Sean uses. I think it's a really exciting product to be a part of because not only are they organic, they're non-GMO, but if you know anything about mushrooms, as more and more of us have been learning about the benefits of mushrooms, not just psychedelic mushrooms, but all types of mushrooms, then you understand that they are a great boon to your health. So Sean recently hooked me up, and I've been trying the Brain Squared, which is for gut pea flower extract, ashwagandha. I also recently picked up the Radiant Energy, which is for pre and post workout. So I go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week, and now starting to take these before and after. These feature cordyceps, reishi, and chaga. And finally, he's got Immune Renew, which is obviously for immunity. This one features chaga, turkey tail, reishi, maitake, shiitake, and extract of nattokinase. I encourage you to go visit the website. It is cultivated-mind.com. And of course, we have a special deal and a discount for those of you who want to purchase them through my link at cultivated-mind.com/cm/broze, BROZE. You can check out the link on the screen right now, or wherever you're watching, check out the link. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. Iran. By now, as I'm recording this, the so-called 12 Days War, as they're calling it, this bombing, really an unprovoked bombing from Israel to Iran, and then bombing back and forth, people dying on both sides, unfortunately. And that's one important point before we go further. I don't stand with the U.S. government. I don't stand with the Israeli government or the Iranian government or the Iranian military or the Israeli military or the U.S. military or any of their NATO allies or China or Russia. I stand with the people of all these countries, because at the end of the day, the people are going to suffer. And that's what we're already seeing. So the egos of Trump and the leaders of Iran and Netanyahu battle each other out, and they decide to drop bombs, often based on lies, and real people suffer. That doesn't mean we're going to explore some of these theories, as many of you may believe, that there's actually coordination between Trump in Iran and Israel. And I have my skepticism. I asked this in a poll on social media the other day, whether or not people actually believe that those nations, the US, the UK, the Five Eyes nations, Israel on one side, and then Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, etc. If people truly believe that these are opposing forces, or if that's all a show and behind the scenes they all get along. I tend to think that there might be some real conflicts based on cultural differences and different kind of details. But at the end of the day, these people are going to align together and work together 99 times out of 100 before they work with you. They're going to align and work together before they work with you. So even if they don't agree on every single decision and the whole thing's not a complete, staged soap opera, they will still work together in the end. And the only reason people get taken out like Gaddafi or Saddam. Doesn't mean they're good people, but the main reason that the U.S. decides to act and their allies decide to act is if it benefits them, and not benefits American interest or freedom or democracy, but it benefits the oil companies or benefits the pharma companies to get opium or other things like that, or geopolitical moves, things like that. So I'm hyper skeptical about everything that we're seeing playing out. So Israel bombs Iran and then bomb back and forth. And then just this past Saturday on the 21st, Trump bombs Iran in a huge step forward. I mean, this is unprecedented. I mean, you can go back and find articles on theconsciousresistance.com and videos I've done where we've talked about this and warned that there likely would be some type of false flag under the Trump administration, and that Trump was going to get pushed towards war with Iran. I know some of you take a kind of favorable approach of that and think, well, Trump is being tricked by the deep state. I don't. I believe this was part of the reason Trump was brought in the first place. We'll talk more about that in just a second, but let's go ahead and look at a couple reports here. This is an NBC News report when we first got the news. As you see here, President Trump announces U.S. strike against Iranian nuclear sites. Now, there's on the Trump side, on the U.S. government side, they're claiming this was a complete obliteration of Iranian nuclear capabilities, because they've been telling us for decades now that Iran was weeks away or months away from being able to have nuclear capabilities, and that they could strike the U.S. or the U.S. allies and blah, blah, this kind of stuff. It's been one of those long, propaganda pieces. And that's, again, not a defense of Iran or anything like that. But I've certainly been hearing that the whole 15 years that I've been doing activism journalism, that Iran was weeks away. And it just seems like a convenient propaganda tool when they want. Seems like another, weapons of mass destruction that we're being warned about and told to be afraid. Nevertheless, after Israel launched attacks at Iran unprovoked, and meanwhile in the background there have been these negotiations going on. In fact, this past Sunday, right before Trump bombed Iran, there was supposed to be continuations of peace talks, and of course Israel bombed them before they even made it to the next date for the peace talks, and then Trump bombed them too. And Trump was claiming that this is a complete obliteration of the nuclear sites, but now we're getting mixed reports. Here's one from MSNBC. We're going to look at a few different things. And again, I know some of you are going to say, Derek, these are mainstream websites. Take it how you like. Well, we're looking at across the spectrum. We're not just looking at independent media claiming they have secret sources, but we are second guessing and looking deeper than what the mainstream is saying. But it's important to know what they're reporting. And also, as I've said on this show before, that's not really how false information works. It's not that the corporate media is completely fake all the time, 100%. It's that they mix truth with lies, and it's important to be able to decipher those things. So anyways, MSNBC says how Trump took advantage of Iran's face-saving retaliation strategy. Iran fired 14 short and medium-range ballistic missiles towards a U.S. base in Qatar, and this was at what they called the low end of the escalations ladder. So, as I said, Israel bombed Iran. The two of them start going at it. Trump bombs Iran on Saturday, claims it's a complete obliteration of all their nuclear capabilities, and then Iran says they're going to retaliate. But the interesting thing is they actually did notify the U.S. government ahead of time. And I started to look into this, if this is a normal thing. There are examples of militaries giving each other advance notice when they're going to attack for various reasons. It's kind of weird. It's weird to all of us to even give your enemy a courtesy of like, hey, by the way, we're about to launch a bomb on one of your bases, just in case you want to get some people out of there. Go ahead and do that. And we're going to blow it up in a couple hours. That's kind of what it looks like happened with Iran retaliating to Trump's bombing. They notified the Trump administration and told them that they were going to be launching some missiles at this Al Udeid air base in Qatar. And it was supposed to be this, at the end of the day, this is a symbolic action. And this opinion piece calls it a highly choreographed nature of the attack, which came only after Iran gave Qatar a heads up about when the attack would occur and where it would send the missiles, and can it only be described as a concerted effort to attempt to limit the damage to the absolute minimum. Trump acknowledged this on Truth Social, writing, I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody was injured. And I found that in the past, Trump has kind of talked about this whenever he, in his first administration, when he violated international law and assassinated Soleimani, which was also a whole other constitutional controversial thing, he did interviews after that and said that in retaliation to that, the Iranians launched some missiles, but they let the U.S. know ahead of time. So that's kind of weird. And some people see that and they're like, okay, this is all just a stage show. They're literally just telling each other when they're going to bomb each other. And I don't know, that could be proof of it being staged or some, kind of coordination. It also does appear, as I said, that sometimes there have been historical examples where they do warn each other. Now, as far as the claim that Trump had destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities, this is what I'm finding now as of tonight, the 24th. Reuters, U.S. airstrikes failed to destroy Iran's nuclear sites, sources say. Now, of course, we should be skeptical always of just anonymous random sources, but I think Reuters is less sensational than a lot of the cable news networks, and I will not be surprised if this is just the first confirmation of more to come. It says, 3 sources familiar with the matter who spoke on condition of anonymity told Reuters of a preliminary assessment that says the U.S. airstrikes did not destroy Iran's nuclear capability and only set it back by a few months, according to a U.S. intelligence assessment, which is an initial intelligence assessment, which I won't be surprised if later Trump intervenes or they claim later, well, that was just the initial assessment. We later realized, no, he did destroy everything. And then we're going to have just conflicting narratives. One of the sources said Iran's enriched uranium stocks had not been eliminated, and in fact, the country's nuclear program may have been only set back a month or two. The assessment contradicted Trump's assertion this weekend that strikes had succeeded in destroying Tehran's nuclear program and raised questions about further U.S. military actions if indeed the program survived the intense aerial bombardment. The White House says the report was flat out wrong. The Trump administration told the UN Security Council on Tuesday that its weekend strikes had, quote, degraded Iran's nuclear program, short of what Trump had said earlier about it being obliterated. And Netanyahu, a prime minister of Israel, said that on Tuesday that the 12 days war of Iran had removed the threat of nuclear annihilation and was determined to thwart any attempt by Tehran to revive its program. So they're still threatening them. They're still saying this. But the first intelligence report is claiming that they only set it back maybe weeks, maybe months. Trump saying this is flat out wrong and that they degraded the program or they obliterated it. I think one theory here, because of course some people will jump and be like, haha, Trump and his stupid thing. He not only violated the Constitution, he didn't even succeed at what he claimed to do. They are, of course, claiming there's a ceasefire right now. But how long is that going to last? I don't know. And like I said, is this really all theater? These are questions we need to ask. But one way to think about this is that maybe there's an initial strike. Trump gets to claim like he did something great, but then later intelligence shows we actually didn't succeed. So we need more bombs. We need to actually fully go to war with Iran, or we need troops on the ground or something like this. So this so-called mistake could just be setting the stage for further action. And you see this also being reported now on CNN. Exclusive U.S. strikes on Iran did not destroy nuclear sites, sources say. And then we got another one here. This is the New York Times. Now, let's switch for a moment before we get to some of the propaganda about sleeper cells, that they're saying that there's going to be Iranian sleeper cells that are going to pop up everywhere. Again, the fear porn is back in full bloom. But let's talk for a moment about the constitutionality of what Trump has done here. And I want to pull up 2 articles, one from the New York Times and one just from NBC News. Some lawmakers in both parties question the legality of Trump's Iran strikes. Was Trump's Iran attack illegal? Presidential war powers explained. And okay, let's start with the New York Times here. Again, the question here for a moment we're considering is whether or not this was illegal, constitutional, etc. I'm arguing that it's not, because and I will say again, I'm not even like a hardcore constitutionalist, but for people who claim to be conservative and claim to be, make America great again, make, America first, they sure seem to throw out the Constitution whenever it's not convenient for them. And I thought that's something they cared a lot about. So that's why we're considering this. Bombing Iran without congressional authorization escalated a bipartisan trend of presidents bypassing the original intent of the Constitution right there. No, Trump's not the first person to bomb another country without a declaration of war. Obama did it. Bush did it. We had the authorization of military force post 9/11. Of course, that's one thing, but that wasn't supposed to be a permanent state of emergency where you could just bomb any country forever into the future. That's the problem here, is that this should be reauthorized, and that Congress should have, our quote unquote representatives should have to come and approve of this. And there have been people over the years, including Ron Paul and now more recently Thomas Massie, who try to bring up the War Powers Act and get Congress to actually vote on this or to try to impeach a president for intervening in other nations. Because we know Obama bombed Libya. He's dropping bombs in Somalia. So was Trump. We had bombing, of course, in Afghanistan and Iraq. Yemen, U.S. funding, military operations in Yemen through Saudi Arabia, as well as, of course, against the Palestinian people by funding Israel. I think these are all acts of war. Even if the U.S. isn't putting boots on the ground in every case, if we're dropping bombs, if we're supplying weapons of war, I think that's still, that's part of the same thing in my mind. So let's get into this. This is from Charlie Savage at the New York Times. President Trump's decision to bomb 3 nuclear sites in Iran has prompted accusations that he violated the Constitution by carrying out an act of war without congressional authorization. The dispute underscores a split between the apparent intent of the Constitution and how the country has been governed in practice. While most legal scholars agree that the founders wanted Congress to decide whether to go to war unless the country is under attack, presidents in the modern era have carried out military strikes without authorization from lawmakers. Courts have shied away from weighing in, and Congress has acquiesced rather than impeaching those presidents. Jack Goldsmith, Harvard law professor, says, was the Iran strike constitutional? I don't know, because the constitutional law of war powers is inscrutable. Here's a closer look. They talk about what happened. It says critics are accusing Trump of violating the Constitution. Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat, said on Fox News, it's unconstitutional for a president to initiate a war like this without Congress. I bet he didn't say anything during Obama's years. Republicans have not been silent as well. Thomas Massie wrote on social media, this is not constitutional. And of course, Trump is going to war and attacking Thomas Massie, even though I don't think he's perfect, and I know he's got some shady fundings. Like people like 7 Seas have looked at some connections, even though he's not technically funded by AIPAC. There might be some indirect funding. He's still right about this. What does the Constitution say? The Constitution says the Congress has the power to declare war while it makes the president commander-in-chief of the military. Most legal scholars agree that the founders intended to separate the power to initiate a war from the power to run a war once it has begun, leaving the president able only to repel sudden attacks without first going to Congress. So most legal scholars agree that the founders wanted there to be a separate power to initiate war from a separate power to run a war once it has begun. And the president only has the ability to act without Congress to repel like sudden invasive attacks, not to launch ongoing attacks. In the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton wrote that the American president, while commander-in-chief of the armed forces, would have less power than the British king, since a president could not declare war by his own authority like a monarchy could. The Constitution also makes ratified treaties the supreme law of the land. The United Nations Charter, a treaty that the Senate ratified after World War II, says that except in self-defense, a country may only attack another country if the UN Security Council has authorized it. And I'm not saying we should follow the UN, but just another example of how the US signs things and doesn't even follow them. But in practice, since the end of World War II, the U.S. has maintained a large standing army, and they have rarely gotten congressional approval. Presidents since the end of the Cold War have obtained congressional authorizations for major land wars like the Gulf War, Afghanistan, and Iraq. But again, even those are sketchy circumstances because of the AUMF, the authorization of the use of military force post 9/11, which was just kind of rubber stamped every time. But presidents have also asserted a right to carry out so-called limited interventions, airstrikes, without going to going to Congress for congressional approval. So the article goes on from there. I will include this in the notes. I think, again, I'm not asking you to trust the New York Times alone, but this is a good summation of the legal issues at hand. We'll just read one more part. Is attacking Iran war in the constitutional sense? Some people who agree that the Constitution sometimes lets presidents carry out limited strikes without going to Congress have argued that bombing Iran's nuclear sites is different. Attacking Iran, they say, would be much more dangerous, carrying too much risk of escalation into a major armed conflict for one person to decide. So I guess they're saying because they're attacking alleged nuclear sites, it's fine. But if they were to attack something else, then that's too much risk of escalation. So it says in the Times Executive Power Survey during the 2020 cycle, Biden defended the executive branch's general view that presidents can, on their own, authorize strikes that are short of war in the constitutional sense. He suggested that prior to congressional permission, it would be constitutional and necessary to bomb Iran. This is what Biden said in 2020. Any initiation of the use of force against Iran or North Korea, unless in response to an imminent attack, which there was no sign of an imminent attack, definitely against the U.S., could certainly result in a wide-scale conflict and constitute a war in the constitutional sense that would require authorization by Congress. And then, of course, there's the War Powers Resolution, which was at the end of the Vietnam War. Congress tried to reclaim some of its eroding authority by enacting the War Powers Resolution, overriding a veto by President Richard Nixon. It says a president may only introduce forces into hostilities with congressional authorization or if the U.S. has been attacked. But as I said, this has also been, kind of overridden, like they say here. It also requires presidents to terminate deployments after 60 days if they lack authorization, which would suggest that one-off strikes and brief operations are allowed. Presidents of both parties have acted beyond the statute's purported constraints about when they may launch an attack, seeing it as unconstitutionally narrow. So they pretty much just do whatever the hell they want in the end. The courts aren't going to stop them, and Congress isn't stopping them, and voting ain't stopping them. And then one more, we won't read the whole thing. Some lawmakers in both parties question the legality of Trump's Iran strikes. I will include this one as well. But like I said, there's Thomas Massie, there's others who are, Ro Khanna is also, I think Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie introduced a resolution to try to get them to vote on the War Powers Act. I don't think that's going to happen, but people are trying to speak against this. And then one other opinion is coming from the 10th Amendment Center, which I'm trying to get an interview with the 10th Amendment Center soon. My friend Michael Bolden is one of the founders, if not the founder, and they've been at this since the 2010s. One of the true good independent organizations out there trying to help you understand the law and the way government is supposed to work, the way the U.S. government was supposed to work, at least in this idealized world, which I don't think is realistic and will ever happen. But they at least try to show you how the states are supposed to act in these circumstances. So let's take a look at this thread that they put together. This is actually from March, but just because it's relevant still. Thread, the declare war lie. Almost everything you've been taught about the Constitution and war powers is pure propaganda, and they have a video. But the thread says the executive has no right, this is a quote from James Madison, the executive has no right in any case to decide the question whether there is or is not cause for declaring war. When he said in any case, he meant it. No exceptions, no loopholes. Yet today, politicians and so-called experts tell you otherwise. Just call it something other than a war, and Congress isn't needed. The Constitution is crystal clear. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. Congress shall have the power to declare war, not the president, not the judiciary. The founders intentionally gave this power to Congress. Thomas Jefferson said, Congress alone is constitutionally invested with the power of changing our condition from peace to war. James Wilson wrote, it will not be in the power of a single man to involve us in war. The founders designed the system to prevent unilateral war making. Even Alexander Hamilton, who supported a strong executive, agreed, writing, quote, the legislature alone can declare war, can alone actually transfer the nation from peace to hostility. When Hamilton sounds like a small government guy in comparison to almost everyone today, you know things are way off the rails. He also said James Madison called this the wisest part of the Constitution, quote, and no part of the Constitution is more wisdom to be found than in the clause which confides the question of war or peace to the legislature. Why did the founders do this? They fought a war to secede from an empire where one made that decision. They knew an executive with unchecked war powers equals tyranny. And this thread goes on. I will include the entire thread for everybody who wants to follow that. And then just to show you kind of even more relevant today, DC Drano, who is a total, freaking America first psyop. Never forget, Thomas Massie tried to stop President Trump from destroying Iran's nukes and negotiating a peace deal between Iran and Israel. And as people are calling him out, Iran never had nukes. They weren't close to enriching uranium. Ceasefire is not a peace deal. But the 10th Amendment Center did call this out and said, the only people who say an airstrike isn't war are the people who have been so damaged by government-run education that they know nothing from the founders or how they defined war. So I think that's really where it stands. I think it is absolutely an unconstitutional act. And it's something that, if there was ever actually a government that give a damn about that, or if the people were able and capable of holding the politicians accountable, or if the courts were, you would see impeachments, not just with Trump, but it would have happened with Biden. It would have happened with Obama, and it definitely would have happened. Maybe Bush could have got away with it because, post 9/11, he did get some authorization. Now it went way beyond 60 days and it just dragged on and dragged on. Of course, Obama came in and promised to change that. We all know how that turned out. But definitely Obama, definitely Trump, definitely Biden should have been impeached on the unconstitutional war actions alone. The final section of this story, guys, relates to this claims of sleeper cells and of the general propaganda that is popping up now that Iran might respond to the U.S. attacking them with cyber attacks or sleeper cells. Like I told you already, they already bombed a U.S. Army military base in Qatar, and they warned the U.S. ahead of time. And one building got blown up from what I saw. I think the reports I read said that all the missiles that got launched, the U.S. blocked them except for one, and then it blew up a little piece of the base. And so they can say, hey, look, we're under threat. And Iran can say, hey, we stuck it to them. They both get to feed garbage to their people. But now they're saying there could be cyber attacks, there could be sleeper cells, there could be, all kinds of things. And they want people to be living in a state of fear again and all hyped up and paranoid. And I want to warn against this. But I also, let me go ahead and pop this back on screen. I do want to explore this claim for a moment. Trump administration boosts monitoring of possible Iran-linked cells in U.S. as Trump weighs strikes, sources say. This is before Trump bombed, so 2 days before. But they were already kind of seeding that out there that Iran might be, coming after the U.S. and sleeper cells, and then Trump bombs them, and now there's still propaganda about that. Now, here's one from MSNBC from just June 23rd, yesterday, so a couple days after Trump bombed, General Wesley Clark. There are Iranian sleeper cells in the U.S. that could self-activate in retaliation. It says, Iran is vowing a retaliation after the U.S. struck its nuclear facilities over the weekend. NBC News talks to former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, retired General Wesley Clark, for his insight and expertise. And so he says, Iran could self-activate. You guys might remember Wesley Clark, retired United States Army officer and general, obviously. And he was most well known because, as this WikiLeaks tweet recently reminded us, former general of the U.S. Army Wesley Clark, after the 9/11 attacks, he said this to Amy Goodman on Democracy Now!, that there was a plan that the U.S. was going to take out 7 countries in 5 years. This was in 2007. Now, obviously, it's taken longer than 5 years, but Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing it off with Iran. That was his words. And guess what? They tweeted this out August 2024. So it's interesting. Here's another article from that time from Al Jazeera. This was 2003. U.S. plans to attack 7 Muslim states. Presidential hopeful General Wesley Clark says the White House devised a 5-year plan after 9/11 strikes to attack 7 majority Muslim countries. So you can see that this was being discussed. It's kind of weird now that Wesley Clark, who was warning that there was a plan to do that, is now on MSNBC essentially selling propaganda about Iranian sleeper cells, that it's like he's kind of selling the narrative to justify why the U.S. should go further. Maybe he could be telling the truth. Maybe he doesn't realize that he's selling propaganda. Maybe he doesn't realize the role he's playing, especially when he was the one who warned about it. I don't know. I just find it really crazy that years ago, this guy's warning there's a plan to invade all these countries, finishing off with Iran. And now here he is in 2025 on MSNBC selling some sleeper cells propaganda. In fact, if anybody's going to have sleeper cells, I would guess it would be the CIA or the Mossad. And I will take you back to this report that some of you saw. It had 1.7 million views on, when did this come out? It was in December 2024. How Israel's Mossad tricked Hezbollah into buying explosive pagers. This is remember after the pager bombs were going off and Hezbollah, the Hezbollah agents, the so-called terrorists who are wearing these pagers, they got blown up in Lebanon. And this interview, they interview an undercover kind of anonymous Israeli agent who describes how they make it happen. I mean, there's some pretty crazy stuff in there. He talks about how we create the reality, you're just living in it. But this to me is just a reminder that if anybody's got the capability for sleeper cells, for attacks like this, it would be the Mossad, it would be the CIA. I don't think Iran has the capability to do this in the U.S. I know there's this narrative that a lot of the right-wing media is buying into. Well, it was because of Biden and his freaking immigration policy, and it let in some Iranian sleeper cells, or was it Chinese sleeper cells? I remember this. They were saying this last year. No, they're letting in the Chinese. No, they're letting in the Iranians. No, they're letting in. And I guess they could be letting them all in, right? But it just seems to be so convenient to keep people in that left-right paradigm of, well, the other side did this, so now Trump has to fix it, and we're going to have to clamp down. We're going to have cameras everywhere. I guarantee you the technocracy is going to advance as part of this propaganda. That's for certain. And that's something we can definitely count on. The other thing I want to say about this is that Israel has a history of these sort of things, of false flag attacks, of terror attacks, and staging them. And we should not put it past them. And I've been warning people about that on social media as well. If you're told that there's some kind of terror attack that happens in the next week or anytime in the coming days, I would be very, very skeptical of that. I would definitely not just blindly take that story and swallow it up. I encourage you to use your critical thinking, to not allow these people to push you towards fear, to push you towards being in a state of imbalance. Again, I'm not saying that there's no war. There's not no potential for any of that to happen. There absolutely could be. Although, as I said earlier, I tend to think these people are kind of all on the same sides, at least to some degree. But don't let yourself be pushed into fear. That's what the predator class would love. That's how they can manipulate us. That's how they can control us if we're not in a state of balance and focus and taking care of our hearts, our minds, our bodies, etc. So just want to send that reminder out there as we get ready to wrap up the show. I've got two more things to cover here real quick. Just want to thank everybody who has been supporting the Pyramid of Power over the last couple months and the last 5 years, really. But we finally wrapped up our final crowdfunding campaign for the Pyramid of Power. We've raised $16,700 through the fiat exchange on fundraiser, and we raised, I think, a couple more thousand, 3 to 4, maybe 2,000-3,000 via Monero, and then some private donations. So probably by this point we've hit 20,000. Now they take out a good chunk here through the fees because of the Stripe and stuff like that, but we've probably hit close to $20,000, and that's just on this latest crowdfunding. Over the years, I think we've raised $55,000 to produce this 17-part series that is going to be over 10 hours worth of content that people are using to homeschool their children. They're using to reach their friends and families, and who won't listen to fear porn and who won't listen to Alex Jones, but will watch a well-researched, well-documented, visually appealing documentary series like The Pyramid of Power. So thank you to everybody who has done this, and everybody who donated over $25. You should have received an email. Look for it. Search your inbox Into the Light at protonmail.com. I created a private Telegram group for anybody who donated at least $25, and they can join and get some kind of behind the scenes updates as we prepare to release the final episode, which has been split into 2 parts. We're here at the end of June. I think this volume 1 of chapter 17 is going to come out probably in the first week or 2 of July. And then a couple months later, the final volume will come out, and that's going to be about an hour and 45 minutes long. This first volume of chapter 17 will be about 50 minutes long, and it does reference the Bilderberg Group, the Committee of 300, the roundtables, and so much more. And I think this is going to be one of the best things I've ever done. So thank you to everybody who donated, and thank you everybody who made it happen. If you didn't get to donate and you do want to support my work, the best way to do that is to go to theconsciousresistance.com/invest. There's a link to my Buy Me a Coffee, to my Substack, and to my crypto wallets if you want to support that way. I am going to be getting a new PO box very soon. I'm here in Texas right now getting it set up before I go back to Mexico, because I know some of you have asked how to support that way, and I greatly appreciate that. So stay tuned. Check out the consciousresistance.com/invest, and that'll be updated very soon. All right, guys. I have this segment of the show that I do sometimes. It's been a little while, but I want to do it tonight, and it's called What's Derrick Reading? And I'm reading a few things right now, but this tonight, before we play our final song, we close out for the night, which I'm going to play a brand new song of myself, which has not been released anywhere else. So you guys who are hearing this show are going to hear it for the first time before anybody else. But before we do that, let's see what Derrick's reading right now. And really what I'm going to go over, I bought a bunch of books last week. I bought like 5 books last week, and then somebody mailed me a book, and then James Corbett sent me his book, and then a friend gifted me a book, and now I've got a stack of books. Okay, so and books are my addiction these days. But let's just go over some of the books I'm reading right now. We got the great James Corbett reportage essays on the New World Order right there. James sent it to me, and he even signed the front there. Really cool. Thank you, James. Let me see what else we got here. This one is called Freedom. It's like a collection of sci-fi stories that I think have like a libertarian or anarchist kind of theme running through them. My good friend Kenny gave these to me. I'm looking forward to checking these out because I like stories, I like sci-fi, I like liberty. And so there's two parts. One's called Give Me Liberty. The other one's called Visions of Liberty. And it's like 7 or 8 stories under each one. And it's just people's ideas on how we could have a future without government. And what does that look like? And I'm excited to check that out and see what that turns out to be like. Somebody also insisted on sending me this, and I'm happy to take new information. A Farewell to Virology by Mark Bailey, Dr. Mark Bailey, Sam Bailey. I've been aware of this book forever. Obviously, you guys know who've been following me. I interviewed Dr. Andrew Kaufman 2 times, Dr. Thomas Cowan, David and Dawn from What Really Makes You Ill. I've covered that topic pretty extensively, and even in my own private research, I've been skeptical of it for some time, and I get attacked by a lot of people for not making the virus question my central focus, but I appreciate this, and I have been reading it, and thank you. The Giza Power Plant, Technologies of Ancient Egypt by Christopher Dunn. I think this is like the original one that kind of started this whole, was the pyramids actually an energy device, a power plant? Let's see, when the copyright, 1998. Yeah, so picked that one up at this little bookstore in Portland. Excited about that. This one's called The Marathon Don't Stop, The Life and Times of Nipsey Hussle, who was a rapper and an activist and a gang member and somebody who I think was trying to find his way in his culture and his community and do good for his people, who was eventually gunned down. And he also, had some skill as a rapper. The Jesuits, 1534 to 1921 by Thomas Campbell, A History of the Society of Jesus from its foundation to the present time, which I used as part of my research for the Pyramid of Power. The Jesuits, 1534 1921. This one, The Plot to Kill King by William Pepper, who James Corbett interviewed several years ago, and I encourage you to check it out. I met him briefly, but I wasn't able to interview him before he passed. The Truth Behind the Assassination of Martin Luther King. It's a thick one, and this is the definitive, work on that topic. And then finally, this one here, Agents of Repression, the FBI's secret war against the Black Panther Party and the American Indian Movement, a big piece of history that I care deeply about. This is COINTELPRO, but how it specifically relates to the Black Panther Party and the Native American Red Power American Indian Movement of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and how the U.S. government was targeting them. And so those are some new books I picked up recently that I'm going to be diving into this summer. Super excited about that. What are you reading right now? I'd love to hear what you're reading. If you know it, have you read any of these books that I just shared? You guys know anything about them? Let me know. And we're going to wrap it up there, guys. I appreciate you all tuning in. I'm trying to stay consistent with my show. I'm still in Texas right now. I'll be going back to Mexico in a couple weeks. As you can tell, I'm not in my office. Don't have my normal lighting, so please excuse that. With everything going on, with the potential wars on the horizon, with technocracy rising, RFK announcing that, they're going to have everybody wearing wearable technology in the next 3 or 4 years, and Bilderberg Group and all this stuff happening. Please find time to center yourself, to spend time with the ones you love. I'm out here this summer spending time with my nieces and nephews, going to the water park, hanging out together, playing kickball, spending time with family, doing my best, living my best life, playing music, traveling. It's always been this interesting juxtaposition for me that I find my personal life becoming more and more beautiful, and I'm reaching my goals while watching the external world get more and more chaotic and crazy. And I don't know what that means exactly, but yeah, I'm doing my best to continue staying in the right mindset as we progress through this crazy time we're living in, guys. And I want to encourage you to do that, because if we do not allow ourselves to become the sovereigns of our own internal world and our own hearts, minds, and thoughts, and instead we allow others externally, politicians, propagandists, mainstream alternative media, corporate media, politicians, whatever, to control your inner state, they've already won. Don't let them win. Reclaim your power, reclaim your sovereignty, reclaim your heart, your mind, your body, your spirit. Step up and say, I'm a human being and I deserve love. I am love. I have love for life, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep individual liberty and human liberty alive for myself, for the coming generations. I'm going to honor and respect my ancestors who come before me, and I'm going to put everything I've got into this to make sure I leave the coming generations, my children and the children coming after me that I will never meet, a better world, to keep that fire of human liberty alive and to make sure it doesn't die as the technocratic state emerges. That's my goal, guys, and I hope you will join me in that. Thank you for listening to tonight's episode of The Conscious Resistance Live. As always, you can find me at theconsciousresistance.com. We're going to end with a conscious song, as we try to every week. This is a brand new song from yours truly, 33, aka Derrick Broze. Like I told you guys, I just got back from being on tour, and it was such a beautiful thing. I got to play 5 different shows across the U.S. with Dub FX, who's a huge inspiration, and my friend Grant Presence, who's also a huge inspiration, and both good friends, and lots of good bonding, and meeting some of you out there who know me from my journalism and who are coming to check out my music, or who didn't know me at all, but you learned about my music, or you know about Dub FX, and you know, something like that. And I'm seeing how my efforts to reach people through presentations and journalism, as well as music, I tried to keep these separate for a long time, guys. And I figured, you know what? The people who follow me on YouTube with the Conscious Resistance, Substack, and elsewhere, they don't care about my music. They don't want to hear about it. And I get it. Some of you don't. But for me, guys, it's all becoming one thing. It's just becoming Derrick Broze, 33. It's just becoming me. And so I might do a presentation and then perform a song. I might perform some songs and share some words of wisdom. And sooner or later, there's no separation. It's just me, because I'm here to educate and empower myself, and to educate and empower any of my brothers and sisters in whatever way I can, through music, through art, through activism, through journalism, documentaries, podcasts, etc. So with all that said, enjoy my new song. It'll be out very soon. This is just it's about manifesting the future we want, guys, and how we cannot allow the predator class to divide us. Till next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.
Check 1, 2, 33. Yeah. We got the divine on our side, cause we stay aligned. We're connected to the great spirit, both heart and mind. We are the creators that we've been waiting for. There's nothing left to do, just close your eyes and explore. They think they can divide us, but we won't let them win. We are stronger together, more united than we've ever been. They trying to divide us, but they can't stop the free people, cause we're manifesting a future where all life is equal. They think they can divide us, but we won't let them win. We are stronger together, more united than we've ever been. They trying to divide us, but they can't stop the free people, cause we're manifesting a future where all life is equal. I never thought I'd get to see so many beautiful people chasing the life of their dreams, yeah, they're free of evil. I look around and I can see what we're capable of, so I count the blessings as they rain down from above. Forgive those who wronged you, cause it's only holding you back. Remember, no one gets out of this life with their ego intact. I take nothing for granted, so thanks for the mentions, but I still find myself walking these streets asking these questions. Like, how can I walk past the garbage in the rivers and streams? How can I walk past a houseless human with broken dreams? Why do we scroll past the images of war and uncomfortable scenes? I wonder what it'll take for us to evolve as human beings. So much missed opportunity, wasted lives, sharpened knives. My enemies waiting to turn their back and tell more lies. But I got the truth on my side, and I'm walking with the divine. No more middlemen, this connection with God, it's finally mine. They think they can divide us, but we won't let them win. We are stronger together, more united than we've ever been. They trying to divide us, but they can't stop the free people, cause we're manifesting a future where all life is equal. They think they can divide us, but we won't let them win. We are stronger together, more united than we've ever been. They trying to divide us, but they can't stop the free people, cause we're manifesting a future where all life is equal. Nothing can stop the march of the unwashed minds. We've spent so much time just waiting for the signs. The messages in a bottle sent through space and time to remind us of our full potential when we are aligned with the Creator's plan and our own true purpose. I'm walking on clouds, man, cause I know I deserve this. Joy, peace, flow state, creation, manifestation, that's all it takes, no more need for explanation. The answers are already in your heart, take a look. Deep inside, your story's being told, you're writing a book of your own life. Take it to new heights, believe in yourself. Anything is possible when you show love and trust yourself. Don't give up, forgive them, give thanks and trust in the Most High. The sooner you cut the dead weight, the sooner you will fly. If you keep ignoring the trauma, sooner or later it festers. Remember, you are never alone, you walk with your ancestors. 33, out.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.